Today we're going to talk about Moses and his part in the Exodus. I wonder what this big black mark is here on this thing.
Redact something?
No. It is. Yeah, but I don't know what it is.
Maybe it won't be on the next slide.
Let me stop it and start it again. Maybe that'll help. Yeah. Thanks for your help. It's back. Never mind. Guys, you'll have to just imagine there's something behind that black thing, okay? You're probably not going to miss out on anything. We are talking about Moses' trips up and down the mountain today. How many times did he go up and down the mountain? 3 times? 4 times? 8 times? Oh, good. I knew you were here for some reason today. I guess you'll find out in this lesson how many times he went up and down the mountain. The term Exodus in our language means the exit. They could just as easily put Exodus on the signs that are, up for you to know where to go and where to leave this place. The entire nation of Israel exited, right, didn't it? It doesn't take but just a few minutes to leave this building, does it? It took them 40 years to exit, according to the way we account for things, right? Honestly, they left Egypt in a matter of a night. They started and they left and they were gone. They were out, all of them. But we think of the Exodus being not only just the exit, but also the trip that it took them to get all the way around to Sinai and all the way then on into Jerusalem in that area in Palestine. You know this famous Jewish scholar? Any ideas on who he might be? Of all the Jewish scholars you've ever known? Who? No? Any other famous Jews you've ever known? Would it help if I told you he was a psychoanalyst? Sigmund Freud. Freud was a Reformed Jew. And what does it mean to be Reformed Jews? Well, they wanted to attempt to divorce the basic Judaic principles and have it fit in with tradition and wherever they happen to be in society. So it's Jews that fit in with the society that they're currently in. You would consider them to be Reformed Jews because they will take the scriptures and all of their commandments and everything and phrase it in ways that make it convenient for them in the economy and the society that they live in. In other words, here, if you go to a Reformed Jewish church someday, I would encourage you to do that, because if you don't go to a Reformed church, you're going to hear a lot of Hebrew and you won't get a whole lot out of it. But if you go to a Reformed Jewish church here in town, you will hear whatever they do in English, and you'll be able to understand more clearly what they're doing. Many of the worship and the day-to-day traditional living principles have been abandoned. They believe the Jewish traditions need to be modernized and made to fit in the society that you're part of, the surrounding culture. So men and women can sit together in a Reformed Jewish church, but in a normal or a unreformed church, I don't know what you call those, a traditional church, they're going to sit apart. Men sit on one side, women sit on the other. They may have women rabbis, believe it or not. That's how traditional they are. They may have, it's okay to drive a car on the Sabbath to things other, like you go to the grocery store if you want to on a Sabbath, or you can go to a football game. But the traditional Jew would tell you, no, you shouldn't do anything. You shouldn't drive your car at all. Maybe to take yourself to the synagogue and have services, but that's it. That's about all you can do. In a Reformed Jewish society, that's not the case. Work on the Sabbath applies only to the person's occupation. In Orthodox communities, only reading the Torah is allowed. In some cases, they get pretty strict about that. Well, Freud had a lot to say about Moses, believe it or not. In 1939, he went off on a rave. He went off on a tangent that no one predicted he would ever do. You probably won't believe what he wrote in 1939. When it was published, it was a shockwave that went throughout the world. It undermined completely the ideas that are taught in the Bible about the early life of Moses. Now, according to Freud, Moses was not a Jew at the beginning. He wasn't Hebrew at all. He was an Egyptian. Moses had an Egyptian name. His name was Tutmos. And a lot of pharaohs had the word M-O-S-E at the end of it. And so Freud looked at this and said, oh, he must have been Egyptian, and his name was Tutmos probably. His parents were originally Egyptian royalty. He was raised and taught in the Egyptian palace. Pharaoh taught him of God. Later, his mother and the God that he then went out and took with them. Pharaoh's mother escaped the harem and gave her young boy to Jochebed, who was a Jewish woman, to raise. And he understood some Hebrew, but he needed an interpreter when he got ready to speak. It wasn't because he needed an interpreter to speak to the Egyptian. He needed an interpreter to interpret Egyptian into Hebrew so he could speak to the Jews. They then co-opted, after they left an unstable Egypt, they co-opted the Ishmaelite religion when they came over and met with the Ishmaelites later. And they felt guilt and prayed that Moses is one day going to return as the Messiah. Now, that's Freud in 1939. I like that from him a whole lot more than I like anything else Freud ever said. But nonetheless, that was him. And he really went off on a tangent and surprised everybody. Think of all the things that we've discussed so far. How long do you think it took for us to exit this building? If someone said fire, how long would it take? Seconds, right? You'd be out of here before 1 minute's over with. The exit only took that amount of time, yet we consider the whole book of Exodus as being their exit of Egypt. Well, how long do you think it took for the Israelites to escape and then wander through the desert, eventually to wind up in Palestine? Well, the Bible records quite a few things happening, but you have to realize the book of Exodus presents a picture of events that cover 40 years. That's how long we're talking about, a 40-year period. Look at all the things that happened. We've already talked about having bitter water at Marah. We talked about coming to an oasis at Elim, quail and manna. By the way, did any of you try the manna recipe? And if you didn't get one, I've got one in my pocket here somewhere. Okay. Did you try it? Did you? Oh, you didn't have corn. You are going to try it? Oh, you're in for a treat, man. Cornflakes. It's wonderful. You'll love it. The Exodus represents a picture of events over a 40-year period. Hi, Jenny. I love you. I know you're watching me. About 2 months. It took 2 months for them to get to Sinai. Pharaoh probably could have been Thutmose III. It would have been 1446 BC. Passover would have been on the 14th of Abib, around the 15th of April as we understand it. There have been probably, if that's the case, about 3,500 celebrations of Passover since then. That's a lot of Passover, isn't it? Well, when they arrived at Mount Sinai, the mountain loomed large in their horizon. Today, we think is Mount Sinai looms about 8,000 feet from the ground. Now, today's airliners fly roughly about 35,000 feet above the ground. And so after arriving at the mountain, Moses goes up to talk with God. Don't think that just because they're not at that altitude that there is any more ability to breathe the oxygen up there. No, it's lessened a whole lot. And I am really surprised that an 80-year-old man could go up and down the mountain that many times, but he did.
God. I did when I was 29.
Pardon?
I went to the top.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You guys have been there.
I was 29 years old.
You were 29. Okay. Well, this is what we think is Mount Sinai, or a lot of us think is Mount Sinai today. An ugly mountain, isn't it? It doesn't have any of the majesty of the mountains that we have in Colorado and the Rockies, does it? Kind of barren. It's kind of nothing but a clump of mud and dirt and stuff, it looks to me like. There are 13 different possible sites that are spread over all of that area, and no one really knows which one of those is Mount Sinai today. But let's just assume, for the purpose of this lesson, that that is Mount Sinai. This mountain is known as Jabal Musa. It's one of the most people believe is Mount Sinai. It has an elevation of, like I said, 8,000 feet. The Catholics built a monastery at its base, and if you look down here, you just see the edges of the monastery there, but that's where the monastery lies, right at the base of Sinai Mountain and the other mountains in Jabal Musa. The path is very difficult as you ascend up to its peak. It would be very difficult for me, but pathways and stairs have been built and they assist. So just how high is this mountain? Again, a typical airliner flies 5 to 7 miles up. It's about a mile up from the bottom to the top. It's about a mile. And you won't need air-breathing equipment for this particular trip up and down that mountain. I don't think you had to, did you, Britt? Yeah. Mount Sinai is as tall as something between the Boston Mountains, which we know very well, right? And Twin Peaks Mountain out in California. It's about 1/3 of the height of Mount McKinley in Alaska. If you've climbed the peak of Pinnacle Mountain near Little Rock in Arkansas, you really haven't started on your journey yet up to this mountain at least. It's pretty small. And the black is covering those other mountains. The Boston Mountains would be about where my cursor is, and here's Pinnacle about right here. I mean, you just barely even started the journey. It's like a pimple more than a mountain. So how old was Moses at the time? Well, I think I've already given that away. He was 96 years old. He must have been young for his age. Kazim Gürbüz of Turkey is 96 years old. I thought 60-year-old people were old until I got to be 60. One man in history, he's alive even today. His name is Kazim Gürbüz, and he's shown the world what it could be like if you were 100, because he's 96, and never smoked, ate a balanced meal, watched your weight, exercised every day, and apparently it never hurts to have a woman nearly 1/3 your age hanging onto your arm. But he does look very good for a 96-year-old man, doesn't he? He looks handsome almost. Well, let's talk about these trips that Moses made up and down the mountain. We'll cover most of them. After the bags were unpacked, the tents were all set up, the move-in was complete, God called for Moses, said, let's have a sit-down way up on top of that mountain that you see in front of you. Given that Sinai could have been a mile or more up, the air would have been incredibly thin. Here's an interesting note. We assume there's less oxygen at higher levels, right? We assume most of the oxygen is down here where we are, and the higher you go, there's less oxygen up there, right? Wrong. Totally wrong. Science tells you, no matter where you are in our atmosphere, oxygen is 20-something% of that mix. No matter if you're at the top of the highest mountain or you're at the lowest part of the Dead Sea, it is 21% of the air. The problem is when you walk up the mountain, the air pressure is so much less on you that it's hard for your system to take in all the oxygen that's there. So, that's air pressure and a lesson about that. Moses probably went up more than a mile, and God told him, go back down and tell the descendants of Jacob this. And he gave him instructions. So God tells Israel here through Moses that they are his people, his treasured possession, but there's one condition. What is that condition? The condition is you become Jewish and get circumcised. Is that the condition? Is it any different today than what he tells us? We simply have to obey him fully and keep his commandments. If you obey me, you will be my nation, priestly people, a truly holy nation. So this is the sum result of all that Moses went through to walk up that mountain and come back down that mountain and give that message to the Israelites. You are my people, a blessed nation. Keep my commandments. And thankfully, Moses said, there's only 10 of them. You should be able to keep 10 commandments, right? Yes, sir.
About that general statement now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, that's what he's always asked me.
Hadn't changed.
Regardless of
It hasn't changed.
dispensations, just to hear what I say, believe it, and do it.
That's exactly right. That is exactly it. Eagles can fly between 10,000 and 20,000 feet. And that is more than 2.5 times as tall as Mount Sinai. And believe it or not, from up there, they can see movement of little things that are skittering on the ground. And they know where their food source is when they run down there. They couldn't see a mouse, but they're very keen on motions. They could see something moving down there and then swoop down to find what it is. Eagles can see larger prey moving on the ground at this distance, almost 2 miles up in the air. Okay, so that was his first trip. The second trip up and down the mountain is a little different. Moses told God that Moses told them that he needed to take their reply back to God. So it wasn't just enough for Moses to tell them, you need to obey God. He said, I'm going to take your reply back up to him. And they told him, it's not that we will try to do it. It wasn't even that we will think about doing it. It was that we will do all of what you tell us to do. Did they? Heavens no, they did not at all. But Moses was happy then to return and tell God their decision. Moses went 1.5 miles up the mountain again and getting a good cardiac workout. The third trip up and down the mountain, they were warned before Moses came up that they were not to put one foot on that mountain. In fact, Moses told them, it's not just you, but if your animals walk over there and graze on the grass that's on the edge of the mountain and walk up on the mountain, they're going to die. Well, what would you do in that case? You do exactly what Aaron and Moses did. You would put up warning signs all along and around that mountain. Do not pass this line. This is as far as you can go. Don't do it. And I'm sure some of them did it, and I'm sure that they died as a result of it. They weren't even to set one foot on the mountain. They were to wait for the ram's blast to receive the all is okay message. So they put the cordon up, and Moses would have had to cross it. Now, you're standing there at that mile marker, and you're looking at it and wondering, what's going to happen when I put my foot down on the other side of this? What's going to happen? I imagine Moses, I don't know if he were or not, but it's possible that if he were like me and you, he probably would have. Well, Moses told them all to clean themselves up, put on their their Saturday clothes. The third day seems to be an important thing in the Bible. A lot of different things happened on the third day. It's repeated several times in the scriptures. Here is where you get extra points in here. Do you know the 3 Jewish holy days? Because we're about to establish one of them here. The 3 Jewish holy days. Any idea? Passover is one. What? Okay. Sukkot, is that what you're saying? I can't see you from moving so still. Pentecost? No, it's not really one. It's a holiday, but it's not one of the 3. There's another one that just preceded Pentecost by about 50 days. What would that have been?
Feast of Weeks.
Pardon?
Feast of Weeks.
No.
Passover.
Passover, 50 days later, was Pentecost. The word Pentecost means Penti, or 50. Cost means after, so 50 days after the Passover, that's the name of the Pentecost. Now after Moses returned, whoever that was, you get extra points for that. That's good. After Moses returns, he has the evening to recuperate, and then he was called up the mountain the next day. A tremendous fanfare, though, happened. God appeared on that mountain, and you can see a picture of somebody's view of it. All kinds of rays of light shining, a dark cloud covering the top, and the cloud got lighter as it goes down. Just imagine. And then you hear thunder and lightning and a loud trumpet blast from up there. The people edged near the base of the mountain, afraid to step over that line. God came down, and he descended to them in fire that generated billows of smoke. The mountain trembled. A trumpet sounded louder and louder, and God made a tremendous entrance, kind of like a stage show of some kind. A musical group comes out amid smoke and lights. This must have frightened young and old. This kind of display did not happen, though, in the first 3 visits, did it? On the 3rd visit is when God decided to make himself manifest to the people below. When Moses came down after the 2nd visit, said, visited with God, he's got some things he wants you to do. They didn't have any way of believing that he actually saw anything when he was up there, right? So on the 3rd visit, God made himself manifest to them. Now this is a view that Moses had of Israel below. Do you remember this view, Charles? You may have looked out that very cordoned off area up there.
There's a little stone building there that wasn't being used. It was someone had built it. That was the only thing at the top.
Did you see God there?
Rock, just barren.
Nothing but barren.
Soil, just rock.
Yeah. Pretty ugly mountain, I would say, really, in the scheme of things. After God met with Moses on the 4th event, God told him to go down and warn the people. If Moses was anything like me, Moses would have said, do you really want me to go down and tell them not to set foot on this mountain? I mean, come on, God, we did that already. I set up a cordon. I think they pretty well know what's going to happen because some of their cattle died. Some of the people died. Do you really want me to go down and warn them? If that's the way I would have done it. But he probably didn't do that at all. He probably went straight down and did exactly what he was told to do. So Moses has gone up and down the mountain now 4 times. Was Moses on the mountain when God spoke the 10 Commandments? You remember the movie with Charlton Heston in it? He was up there with God, wasn't he? He took the commandments, and he got angry and broke them. Unfortunately, though, the Bible doesn't tell us that Moses was with God when the commandments were given to him. As a matter of fact, the Bible tells us that he was down with the rest of the people when the 10 Commandments were blasted down in God's voice to them below. So Charlton Heston's movie kind of messed it up for everybody, I believe. And the Bible, people not really reading the Bible probably helps that. But here are the commandments that God commanded from the mountain. Have no other gods before me. One God is all we need. But we know there are many gods, aren't there? I mean, we worship the God of money. We worship the God of fame. We worship lots of gods when we shouldn't. We should put all of our worship and everything we have oriented toward the one God. The second commandment is don't make any graven images. Don't bow to any of them. Do we make graven images today and bow to them? That little slip of money that you hold in your pocket sometimes can become an image, can't it? It's an image, really. Seems to me like we have many people today worshiping money. How about billboards along the way? Or the sign above our favorite hamburger joint? You know, some people worship food, don't they? Many people worship golf, since there are more people playing golf on Sunday than there are people in church, believe it or not. Or fishing, or a football stadium holds about 50,000 people on a Saturday, which is easily more people in our community that will attend all of the churches around. So, yeah, we have other things that we worship, and it's not always God like it ought to be. The third commandment tells us not to use God's name in vain. You sin when you do. It seems so easy for people to slip God's name in conversation in a revolting way. Now, my grandfather, I loved him dearly. I loved him tremendously. He was the most important thing to me, person on this world, as far as I was concerned when I was a youngster. But guess what? He had the most foul mouth of any person I've ever met in my life. I mean, honestly, when I got older, I kept wondering, why in the world did he cuss like that? And I tried to get him to quit, but he wouldn't. It was just his nature. It's just what he did. He cussed his family. He cussed his wife. But I loved him dearly. I hated the way he talked, and sometimes I'm grateful to him because I think more than anything, he's the reason I don't or didn't ever cuss in my life, because of him. But you don't have to curse to take the Lord's name in vain, do you? Are there other ways to take the Lord's name in vain? You can know him in a salvation relationship and still not make him the Lord of your life. You're taking his name in vain. If he's not your master, he's not your Lord. If there are things in your life you know you don't please him, then he's not your Lord. You can call him Lord, you can pray to him, but you're not treating him as Lord. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. He tells us in Commandment 3. And Commandment 4 sets the seventh day as holy, the Sabbath. But the early church chose Sunday as our holy day. They still observe Saturday, though, as a day of rest and worship. But Sunday became the first day of the week, and it was celebrated thusly for the Christians. Commandment 5 is honor your parents so you may live long. My mom always told me that if I didn't honor her, I wouldn't live long, and I believed her. If you plan to live a good life, you better do what I tell you to do. She also told me often, I brought you into this world, I can take you out. Honestly, she said that before Crosby ever did. And I believed her. The sixth commandment is do not kill. You shall not murder. Did God really have to tell us not to murder? I mean, the command is plain, don't kill, but we have to kill animals to live. So clearly he meant don't kill other humans. Who in their right mind needs to be told that killing other humans is not a good idea? Well, apparently, many. In the year 2020, there were almost 20,000 murders in our nation. That's nearly 6 murders for every 100,000 people. It's almost as high as our highest year in 1990. Commandment 5, 6, 7. Commandment 7 is honor your marriage vows. Be as faithful to your spouse as you were on that wedding day. Now sometimes that's easy, sometimes that may get hard. God wants us to be monogamous, though, faithful to our one spouse as we're faithful to one God. You may not know this, but committing adultery is a finable offense in 21 states in the United States of America. It is illegal in 21 states. In 4 of these 21 states, 4 of them, it's a felony offense. You could go to jail for dishonoring your marriage vows. And you could stay there for up to 6 months according to the laws that are on the books. Now, the laws that are on the books don't always get enforced, and that's the case in all of these things. But I think you ought to just completely take it away and not make it a law anymore, right? But they're sitting out there on the books, and the judicial system is not choosing to enforce those laws. Marriage is legally binding, but not legally enforced. Idaho, Oklahoma, Michigan, and Wisconsin, adultery is a felony. In all the other states, in some of the other states, it's just a misdemeanor. But it's not even enforced in any of those states. Commandment 8 is don't steal. We don't have trouble with that, right? We don't steal things, do we? Stealing and cheating is obvious a command, but stealing is almost a daily occurrence. We don't hear about the vast majority of thefts that occur because most of them are considered petty thefts. Still, it's a human condition to covet what our friends and neighbors and some of the businesses out there have, and we want them and we'll get them any way we can. Commandment 9 is like the last one. Be honest. Always be honest. What does placing a hand on the Bible, though, have to do with making a person honest, right? You go to court and say, place your hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth? No, I do. I swear. But does that mean you're going to tell the truth? No, it doesn't necessarily make you tell the truth. Every time you tell a fib, stretch the truth, fake someone out, make someone think you're on your way but really another, all of that is perjury. It's extremely hard in our society to live life without perjuring ourselves. Instead, we should always strive to be true and honest in everything. Some of you are much better at that than I am, to be honest with you, I bet. Some of you are just that way. My grandmother Ruth never lied to me, never told anything that I didn't believe. She was as pure a woman, I think, as I've ever met. And it's interesting that coveting things your neighbor had, Commandment 10, has made it to the commandments. And that it winds up being the last commandment. Don't covet what other people have. But we do that all the time. When you covet something like, y'all's beautiful car. I mean, really, I drive a nasty old thing. I love your car. I covet your car. You are actually breaking many of those laws. Think of marital infidelity, right? That breaks the law. You're commanded to love your husband or your wife. But it breaks other laws too. Giving false testimony. Swearing. Stealing. Coveting. Now, I love this little picture. Anytime you have 2 children together, there's an awful lot of coveting going on, isn't there? And finally, God speaks to the people. They haven't heard his voice yet. They saw the thunder, they saw the clouds of smoke and everything. They may have heard loud sounds, but they haven't heard God speak to them. And then, after the commandments were given, God speaks to them. Why would God choose to appear to them when he did in a dark, thick cloud? Why did he not come down and descend on that mountain and intense light broke out everywhere? It was so light you could see in the middle of the night. Why didn't he do that? Why did he choose to conceal himself in smoke? Have you ever thought about that? I don't have an answer for you. I just always ask myself that question. Peter preached on the day of Pentecost, men of Judea and all who dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known and give an ear to my words, for those people, these people here are not drunk as you think they are. It's only the 3rd hour of the day. But this is what was uttered through the prophet Joel, and in the last days it shall be, God declares that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh, and show wonders in the heavens, above the heavens, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and vapor and smoke. John looked into heaven, and he saw an angel that came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of the saints, which rose before God in that thick smoke. David wrote, may the glory of the Lord endure forever. May the Lord rejoice in his works. who looks on the earth and it trembles, who touches the mountains and they smoke. I will sing to the Lord, and as long as I live, I will sing praises to my God while I have being. God spoke the terms of his covenant to them, very clear. Here are the 10 things I want you to do. Have you ever told your children here, the 3 things I want you to do before I come home? Did they get done? No. God knew, he knew, because he has foresight, these people were not going to obey those commandments. But he gave it to them anyway, told them, this is what I want you to do. And several other laws and regulations. How long could slaves labor before becoming freemen? Laws for personal injury, property rights, social responsibility, justice, and so forth. From this point forward, the Jews would encounter enemies, and God sent an angel ahead of them as a guide, a counselor, an instructor. The people were to follow the angel's instructions. He gave a promise not to expect acceptance by the itinerant people with them, but he told them that they were to wipe those people out when they came into an area. He made them promise not to worship the gods of the land. He wanted them to run the inhabitants completely out and not worship their God. Did the Jews fare very well about that? No. No, they did not. They didn't do what he asked them to. Here are the things that God promised them you could have if you do that. You will live long and you will prosper. But the covenant was sealed finally. Moses built an altar and offered sacrifice. He was a Levite after all. He was perfectly capable of killing a ram and offering a sacrifice, which is what he did. And he offered sacrifice for the first time for them. Here is what God looked like to them when they looked at him. He was sitting on a floor of this color, lapis lazuli. It's as brilliant blue as you can imagine. And Moses went up and down the mountain a 5th time, but it wouldn't be the last time he made his trip up and down the mountain. Altogether, Moses went up and down the mountain 8 times. Thank you very much. I appreciate that none of you fell asleep today, which was surprising but pleasing. Thank you. And I love you all, okay?